You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Daly and Kevin Laramie.
Hello and welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. I'm Mark Daly and I'm joined this week by Kevin Laramie. Kevin, it's a little bit later than we usually record, but we're here. And the good news is that even though it's been a long time since the last show came out, it's going to be a shorter gap between this show and next week. So there is a silver lining.
Exactly. And I have to say, Mark, took me a few days to recover from Sunday. Not only a crazy 51-lap race that took forever to do, but a podium for Montreal Mont-Tremblant Lance Stroll. First podium for a non-Villeneuve ever as a Canadian driver. It was quite a moment. I enjoyed, and I have to say, we'll talk about this probably in a few minutes, in our famous segment now, infamous segment, Taking a Stroll with Lance. Well, it was quite a stroll, my friend. Quite a stroll, Lance.
Well, no kidding. And not only did you have that extremely bizarre and action-packed Azerbaijan Grand Prix to contend with this week, you also went down from Montreal to Toronto for the second leg of the Voyageurs Cup. And that was also a crazy match with an equally crazy finish to that. So your week has been, I would imagine, a lot crazier than the rest of ours.
And tomorrow I got another game, so I'm pretty exhausted. It's quite a week, but getting geared up for my little candy at the end of the month, Mark. Formula E, and we'll talk about it at the end of the show. We'll give a little overview of the teams and the drivers that are maybe to be taking a further look and to make sure that you do not miss their trip to Montreal at the end of the month. But I'm really getting hyped to just seeing racing, like just being next to a track once again, to hear those maybe weird engines and this time around, a weird noise. But I'm really getting geared up. So month of July that starts probably as you're listening to this, it's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, July's shaping up to be a good month, but June definitely went out with a bang in Formula One, literally went out with a bang. If you look at what happened at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and some of the fallout after that infamous clash now between Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton. There were so many things that happened in that race, but it was that one particular incident that will be remembered, I think, talked about for a long time to come, because not only was it an incident between two drivers racing each other and going for the championship, maybe not quite as dramatic as Schumacher and Villeneuve, maybe not quite as dramatic as Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher with the title on the line, but still, it was two guys that were racing, but not quite, because it was the safety car. And, well, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, Sebastian Vettel felt that Lewis Hamilton brake tested him going through that corner when, in fact, Lewis didn't actually accelerate when Vettel did, and he just simply drove up the back of him. And that can happen. I can totally understand why maybe one guy gets a little bit caught out. But it was after that, the fact that Vettel pulled his car out, drove up beside Hamilton, and then proceeded to slam into the side of...
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
It looked like a tackle. Like, it looked like a little bump. It looked like, geez, like a... You know when you're, example, walking in a crowd and somebody nudge you and you nudge back, like, with little like, attention, like a bit of passive-aggressiveness, and that's what it was. This wasn't passive-aggressive at that point. It was actually just aggressive. It was like, aggressive. Here you go. You did me wrong, so I'm going to do you wrong. Here.
Well, the thing that is amazing, too, is just what he did is how he slammed his car into the side of Lewis's car. He could have very easily broken the suspension on either one of their cars. And obviously he didn't. I mean, you see how fragile those, like the suspension is on a Formula One car. We saw it later in the race when Nico Hülkenberg just grazed the wall and snapped his right front suspension. And it doesn't take a lot. And that was the amazing thing, is the potential damage.
No, Lewis's race was ruined as well because of the headset. Well, the headrest, I mean, that got undone and couldn't be bugged. Maybe that was created by that little contact with Vettel. Who knows? But that's what I'm saying. You never know what can happen. And sometimes just incidents like this can ruin everybody's race. And it almost did at that point. And just worst case scenario, right? This is the first time safety car in Baku. It's the second year. We all expected last year. It never came. This year, it came.
Quite a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Sainz talked about this as well. Like, the restarts are dangerous because when you're in the big straight line that's like almost 2 miles long, that's fine. But once you're in the tight curvy turns and the very narrow segment in the old city going up the hill, it's quite difficult to go at slow pace, all one behind another in the safety cars. And they were complaining about dangerous situations where you can break your car easily. And what if there was going to be more contact and one goes sideways and there's big like pile up and there's 10 cars that can't finish? That's not good for anyone. And that's the worst case scenario, yes, but it could have happened with Vettel's move on Hamilton. So there still might be possible ramification down the road for Vettel's move. It's still being looked at as we speak. But right now, it still did ruin Vettel's race because he didn't win. He could have. Because if you take that out of the way and the 10-second stop and go penalty, Vettel would have been first after Hamilton goes in to fix his headrest. So that's literally, like, there's a few cars that could have won on Sunday.
Yep.
Ricciardo did. Could have been a Williams. Massa would have won if it wasn't for, I think it was a technical problem. He would have won. McLaren could have won if they had a little better car. They were fifth. They were fifth and closing in. But then other cars kept catching them every time they go on the great straights. And at the end of the day, they finished ninth. So a lot of cars could have won that race. But Vettel is the one that could have won even more easily if it wasn't for that brain freeze, that lapse of judgment in that second. It probably only lasted a second, but it could have been even worse. But it cost him 10 seconds, which at the end of the day cost him a win.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting too. And I've been thinking about this whole Lewis Hamilton headrest thing. And I was thinking about it quite a bit that perhaps, well, would it get dislodged when Vettel drove up the back of him? Perhaps. But when you think about the way that these cars are designed and engineered, that they're supposed to withstand impact loads of multiple G's. So I was thinking if it just takes a little tap from another car from behind, then that's basically the headrest has failed, because if Hamilton has an accident and drives in, crashes into the wall or whatever, then it's obviously going to fly off. So I don't really buy the argument that it was caused by Vettel driving up the back of him. However, it was curious, because if Vettel, like you say, didn't drive into him, didn't go and smash into him, didn't get that 10-second stop and go penalty, that was his race to win, and he would have pulled out another 25, 30 points in Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship. And obviously, it's only, well, I mean, if he gets banned, which is a possible outcome of this FIA investigation, the gap could only be 2 points. But that is another story. But again, I think why there's still a lot of controversy over this one is just the fact that he did have the stop-go penalty. Hamilton did have to go in and change the pits, or go into the pits to change his headrest. And Vettel still came out in front of him and still managed to hang on and keep fourth place at the end of the race. So
the last two laps of this race, Mark, were incredible.
Yes.
Like, I have waited to see that type of racing where, well, actually, we're close. We were really close to see cars overtaken and then losing it. Like, actual racing, we were that close to seeing it. Like, just maybe half a second close on multiple occasions on that track for different position. The Vettel Hamilton was in DRS zone at the end. And that could have been even more interesting if he had like 1 or 2 laps more to catch up on Vettel. The Bottas taking Stroll on the line, literally.
That was amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
It was amazing. And that happened because Stroll did a little mistake. I think it was in turn 5, but I could be mistaken easily. And that was in the last lap, and because he was almost a second and a half down, Bottas, and he cut that whole second back in the last lap and pipped him on the line, which is crazy, and you never see that. What's the last time you saw a car pipped another car to the line? Like, it's been like Stroll said on the podium to David Coulthard, could be one of the closest finish ever.
It was something else. And I thought just in general, it was amazing to watch the difference between the Mercedes-powered cars and everybody else, especially at the end of that long straightaway. I mean, you had that feeling every time there was a restart that Sebastian Vettel was basically hanging on for dear life. And I think it may have been after the final safety car that when they got down into turn 1, that he was basically being swarmed by at least 3 other Mercedes-powered cars, and he just managed to eke his way in front of Felipe Massa coming out of turn 1, and only just literally by half a car length, and I think Massa had to ease off a little bit, but the power differential, like you say, between even the 2 Mercedes-powered cars that were the Mercedes Works car and the Williams of Lance Stroll, that was amazing because, like you say, that final lap, I had that feeling that, okay, well, Stroll is just that much ahead of Bottas that he should just be able to hang on. And they got into that final corner just before they start that long straightaway and before they get to that little dog leg about a third of the way down. And then when they got to that little dog leg, I was like, ooh, I don't know. That's not looking very good. Bottas, I think, is just going to pip him at the line. And he did just that. But so obviously a great result for Lance Stroll. And obviously a great result for Valtteri Bottas, who looked like his race was over on the very first lap in turn 2 when he hopped over the curb and then bumped into his countryman, Kimi Räikkönen. And they both had some damage. They both limped back to the pits. Obviously, Bottas came out a little bit worse for wear of that, but he had to basically go the entire length of the circuit, bar that first corner. And I thought right then and there, okay, this guy's race is done. Unfortunately, he's just going to be too far behind now, but you had one safety car and then another safety car and then another safety car. And then on lap 22, 23, whatever it was, finally the red flag comes out and then they all go back into the pits. And I to me, as impressive as it was for Lance Stroll to get that first podium and to avoid all that chaos that went on around him all race long, for Valtteri Bottas to navigate his way back through the field and come through all those safety car periods and the red flag and still get second on the podium, I think for me, I have to give that slight edge to Bottas as the driver of the day. No disrespect to Lance, but that was something special.
True, absolutely. And just you were talking about the red flag, and I just had a little vision in my mind, and that's where the headdress got screwed up, Mark. That's exactly where it is. You never see this. A driver get out of the car during the race and then going back in. And for the driver to get in and out, you have to take the headrest off. So that's for sure, that's where it went wrong at some point. Either it wasn't clipped properly, either the clip broke when they put it back, and there's sensors everywhere, but I'm pretty damn sure there's no sensors on the headrest. Maybe one of the only things is there's no sensor on that car. It's just like non-complex, just a fixing clamp that you engage when you put it down, right? So I don't think there's sensors for that, so they could have known, and they had no choice but to change it, and that is for sure related to the red flag, where so this was created by Vettel. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't Vettel per se for the red flag. It was an accumulation of debris and everywhere, but it's because Hamilton jumped in and out of the car, and when he came back in, they didn't fix it correctly.
Yeah, I was just thinking that perhaps the last time we saw a race with a red flag was going all the way back to Australia last year, and then I forgot about that very, very wet race at the end of last year at Interlagos in Brazil, when there was the red flag as well. So it does happen, but I do agree with you that probably that's when the problem with Hamilton's headrest did occur, is when they got in and out of the car, because like you say, there probably isn't a sensor for that. And the first time that you actually could see anything happening was in the in-car camera on Hamilton's car, and you could see that headrest, which is that same black color like they have on the inside of the cockpit, but then you could see it lifting up. There's like the pink foam or whatever it is that they use to give it that structural strength. You could see it sort of lifting up, and then there's that famous picture with Lewis kind of reaching over his shoulder trying to push it back down
as he got to the end.
Oh gosh. Jeez. Well, last year the guy, he had the problem at Baku with the engine mapping, the engine settings, and he was trying to figure it out as he went. moment because obviously the new rules, the radio rules that came in to Formula One last year, that they can't coach him or give him the exact settings. He's more or less up to himself to try and figure it out. So last year he had that to contend with, but that at least is two hands on the steering wheel, going through the different settings, twisting the different knobs and pressing the different buttons. This one was completely different. This is, like you say, taking one hand off of the steering wheel at 200 miles an hour and trying to push down a headrest, which he's pretty much doing blind because he's reaching up and over his head.
You see him once just started to turn in front of him, and like it's not working. And then he's trying to see him reach back. He's all strapped in. You can barely move in those things. Never mind trying to reach back behind you. And it must be comfortable as very uncomfortable, to not say a bad word. And you, for sure, like you're so strapped in, just trying to reach back. You must like pull something. It must be uncomfortable. Then you're trying to give pressure to that thing so it clamps back in. No, that was impressive, at least attempt by Lewis Hamilton.
It was. And it was very interesting, that race, just all the different things that happened. And again, do you think that there is now a bit of a civil war brewing, if not if it's completely out in the open at Force India between Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez?
I think they have the similar car, so they're going to battle each other on the track. It's going to happen because their car has a good engine, so they're in front of everybody else. Not in front of the Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari trio, but like the best of the rest so far. So they're going to be close together on the track, and both are young. One has a little less experience than the other. Wants to prove himself. It's perfect storm, right? It's at least they're civil about it, and it's been done with great respect to both drivers and the team. I feel it's racing incidents. It's not necessarily anybody's fault, but both are trying to show that they're better, and I can't blame any of them for trying, right? If I'm Carlos Sainz, I want to show that I'm better than that young Frenchman that comes out of nowhere. I used to be a better driver. I had a better car before, and I need to want to prove myself again. Ocon comes in like, dude, I'm fast. Sometimes faster than you, so why not, right? So both points are valid, and I think it's just that's what it should be about.
Absolutely. And I think what was interesting too was just the amount of overtaking maneuvers and attempts that we saw during that first third or first half of the race. And obviously a lot of them went wrong, and obviously with all the safety cars and eventually the red flag. And I think it's a bit of a shame because I think that the drivers were especially up for it, and the circuit just doesn't lend itself to presenting too many opportunities to overtake. Obviously turn 2 is one, but if you get your line a little bit wrong, then you're going to hop over that curb and you're going to drive right into the side of the guy that you're trying to overtake. And we saw that several times on Sunday. But after that, there really aren't very many other places to pass. And then I guess if you're lucky enough to have a Mercedes engine in your car, you can out-drag somebody down that long straightaway. But you get into that very tight and twisty section in the old part of the city there, and there aren't very many opportunities to pass in there as well. So I think that the will is there from the drivers, but there just really isn't that much of an opportunity to make very much of an overtaking maneuver. It's not as bad as, say, Hungary or Monaco, but I think it's just maybe a little bit better, but not by much.
No, I have to agree with you. Now, we've been talking about this race for a good 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Danny Ricciardo, from 19 to first to winning the race. That was impressive. That himself saying, look, I never thought I'd win this race. I was almost last. And I'm like, if you would have asked me then if I would win this race, I'd be like, you're crazy. But because of circumstances and just performance just there enough at the right time and right positioning, and lo and behold, Danny Ricciardo is fifth win, first in 2017. That's impressive.
It is. I think it's a great story too, because only just before the Canadian Grand Prix, Christian Horner was coming out saying that, they're still lacking a little bit of power in the Renault. Obviously, the Renault is not quite as bad as the Honda and the McLaren, but still, they felt like they just didn't have the performance to compete. And you look at Ricciardo, the past 3 races before Azerbaijan, he was on the podium, he was scoring points, and he was doing well. And obviously Verstappen has had his problems, 2 straight engine failures at Baku and also at Montreal. So he's obviously having a bit of a tough season, which is unfortunate. But it's great for Ricciardo, and it's great for Red Bull when they know that they're not quite as good as the Ferrari and the Mercedes, obviously. And they're stuck in a little bit of that in-between world. They're a little bit better than, say, your Force Indias, your Mercedes, and your Haas and teams like that, but they're not really, like I say, they're better than them, but they can't catch up to the front. So I think this was a good confidence boost for them, and I think it's a great result for the team. Obviously, very unexpected. I mean, it really was a lottery. It could have been any number of drivers that could have won that race. And I mean, you just look at some of the guys that didn't finish. And just how that race slipped through their fingers. And obviously Vettel and Hamilton are a couple of guys that could have won that race as well. So it's great to see for Ricciardo. And they're going to their home race at the Red Bull Ring in Austria next week. And, well, who knows? I mean, they said that they didn't expect to be competitive over the course of these races, but they're picking up results. But I don't know. They would need similar good fortune in Austria to pull off another win. That's what I think anyways.
Yeah, true. But back-to-back podium for Daniel Ricciardo. Back-to-back shoey in Formula One. That was impressive. And you know who else had a shoey on Sunday?
Lance Stroll.
Lance Stroll. I think it's time. It's time for, well, taking a stroll with Lance. The podium edition. I have
Podium
to say,
edition.
yeah, exactly. I have to say, I was quite impressed. Not just by his race, not just because he's one of the few drivers that didn't hit the wall, didn't do basically any major mistakes in practice, in qualifying, or during the race. And that's impressive for a new track that nobody really knows that much after just one race on it that he wasn't part of. So I was duly impressed by that, by his speed, by his breaking out moment, coming out of his shell, connecting with the fans on the podium, just being a happy 18-year-old. And people got a chance to see a side of him that they didn't see the season so far. So I was duly impressed on many levels. And, well, you know what? A few weeks ago, we said it wasn't just quite good enough. It is now.
Well, yeah, I think it's a great story because if you look back to Montreal a couple of weeks ago, what did he qualify? Like 17th or something like that? He was way down there.
I think it was like 17th or 16th, yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was way down in that bottom third of the qualifying. I don't even think he made it into Q2 for the Canadian Grand Prix. Anyways, he did manage to get P9 in that one, which was very good. It's obviously his first points in Formula One. And after seeing what happened in Baku, obviously there was a bit of good fortune that went into that one because, I mean, not only did he not get collected in any one of those accidents, he managed to finish the race. He didn't have any reliability problems, which obviously plagued his teammate Felipe Massa. And he even said after the race that he felt more confident. He felt like everything went well all weekend. I mean, obviously he outqualified his teammate. I think Massa got 9th, Stroll got 8th. So he did excellent. And like you say, it's a brand new track that nobody really knows. And I thought that he looked good out there. I mean, we did have our concerns a couple of weeks ago, obviously up and until the Canadian Grand Prix, that he was starting to maybe look a little bit over his head, maybe a little bit out of his depth. But I think over the past 2 races, he's justified his existence or his reason for being in Formula One. And I think that obviously getting that P3 in Baku is going to take a lot of pressure off of him. And hopefully now going into Austria and some of the other races before the summer break here, that he can just race now knowing that he's got that the proverbial monkey off of his back. You know, the podium's gone. He's had a couple of points finishes. Now he can just go out there and race knowing that maybe that first mental milestone of scoring points is gone now. Just get out there, drive, have some fun, and see what happens.
I'm going to go out on a limb, a very, very narrow and long limb, but I do feel that Lance Stroll will win a race, if not races. I see it in him. And that's if the car can be up to par. I think he will be. And everywhere he has been, he has won the championship before. So it always started the same way it started now. First 6 months of a brand new championship, struggling a bit, then he gets better. And the season after, he's a champion. Am I saying he's going to be the champion next year? No. But if the car is up to par, he will win races.
Well, definitely. And I think that we've seen, obviously, his talent and his skill in the other formulas that he's raced in. But I was having a conversation with my brother a couple of days ago. And if you kind of look at where you compare Lance to some of the other younger drivers in his generation, I think he's there or thereabouts if you compare them one-on-one. And obviously, I think a lot of people look at Max Verstappen as the benchmark for Lance. And when you look at how quickly Verstappen has started having some success in Formula One, it came rather quickly, but his first season, you have to remember, was at Toro Rosso, and that obviously is a middle of the pack kind of team. So it wasn't like he was lighting it up from the very beginning in Formula One. He had a very good rookie season 3 years ago now. And it wasn't until he got bumped up to the full Red Bull team after Danny Kvyat decided that it was a thing that he should keep driving into Sebastian Vettel last year, that eventually he got dumped back down and Verstappen came up to Red Bull. And obviously winning the Spanish Grand Prix in his first outing for the team was I think the odds on that happening again would be astronomical, but I think that Stroll's done okay so far. There were a couple of things that weren't really his fault. If you look at the first couple of races of the year, obviously he had that brake problem in Australia. He tangled with Perez in China and got stuck in the gravel. So that's more of a racing incident. And then he did kind of lose his way there for a little bit, but it's nice to see him recover nicely the way that he has over the last couple of races.
No, I have been impressed, and we've seen him overtake cars in Montreal. We've seen him be performant, and that's back-to-back track where your engine is important, right? Montreal with those big straightaways, especially the second one where it leads to the chicane, the wall of champions, and the finish line. And in Baku, the same type of crazy straights that just you have a little turn to the left, but it's still a straight, and then you have still a fast couple of turns. You need a great engine, and we have seen that great engine do wonders for Williams. Felipe Massa would have won the race if it wasn't for technical problems. And that did open up the door for Ricciardo and open up the door for Stroll to finish on the podium, and yeah, he got Pep on the line. But Williams got a chance to have a very good car in the next few weeks, months, if they can tune it and find, they got a better chance, I think, than Red Bulls. Not necessarily to bridge that gap to the top teams, but on any given day they have the engine that could be making a difference between finishing 9th and finishing 5th. And I think that's what Williams will be doing in the next few months, is consistently getting close to the top 5.
Well, you think at some point it's going to happen for Williams. They do have some very good people there. Even Paddy Lowe said that when he joined the team that Williams is ahead of even a team like Mercedes in some departments. So to hear that come from the mouth of a guy as accomplished and with the reputation of Paddy Lowe, I think is quite interesting, because obviously he's not just saying it to make his new boss look good. He obviously is saying that because he's got reason to do so. And they also have confirmed the appointment of Dave Redding as their new team manager. He's going to start later this month, I believe. So slowly they're getting the pieces in place off of the track. And sooner or later, that's going to have to translate to results on the track. And when you try to catch up ground in Formula One during the middle of the season, that's pretty difficult because everybody's working, everybody's improving, everybody's getting a little bit faster. So to really find that quantum leap in the development or in the performance of your car halfway through the season, it's pretty difficult. So you pretty much have to nail it right out of the gate and then just try and maintain your advantage over your rivals as the year goes on. Because, I mean, you look at Red Bull, they knew coming into the season that they were going to have some issues, and they just haven't been able to close that gap to the front two teams like we were just saying. And Williams is very much the same way. They have gotten a little bit better, I think, over the course of the season, but still there's definitely a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. And that room for improvement, I feel, with the resources of Williams and the know-how and the British engineering that's been making the reputation of Williams for more than 3 decades now, I think will show once again. I have a special spot in my heart for Williams for many different reasons. 20 years ago was maybe my favorite season ever in Formula One racing, and guess what? That's because of Jacques Villeneuve. We all know that. And did he get his mouth shut this week by Lance Stroll? That's another thing. Saying, yeah, he's always negative. Never mind him. And I'm like, that's, well, kind of got a point. The kid's got a point. But to go back to Williams, I do feel that this team will go back to maybe contend for a championship in the near future, because rules and regulations will bring back Mercedes back to earth. Ferrari is going to be there because Ferrari is Ferrari. But Williams, I for some reason, I don't know if it's just the Stroll effect over the last 2 Grand Prix, but even Massa has been quick. Even Massa was very, very competitive this weekend. So I do feel Williams is like making big stride very quickly over the last few months. And if you project that in just a near future, you see them being maybe back in front of Force India, which could be Force 1 very soon, but could be in front of Force India.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And Felipe Massa is another guy that was ruining the fact that he had mechanical problems that ended his race in Azerbaijan. And he figures that he could have had a legit chance to win it. And you have to think that if Ricciardo was the guy that won that race, and there was no reason why Felipe Massa could have thrown his hat into that ring had his car not given up on him. But talking about teams that have been around for 30 plus years, big news today that Ron Dennis is officially no longer involved with McLaren, having sold his shares in both of the different McLaren companies for a reported amount of £275 million. So not a bad day for Ron Dennis.
Nice little retreat by the lake.
Yeah.
Whichever lake he wants. He can probably have a little shack in close to every lake if he would want to. But
or just buy the lake that he wants and build a big house all the way around it.
How about he builds his own lake? That's the type of thing you could do with 270 million pounds, which is like, what, 500 billion Canadian dollars? It's like,
something like that.
Yeah, no, it's quite a retirement party that he will have.
Absolutely. And if you look at what happened under his leadership of McLaren, 17 world championships, 7 constructors, 10 drivers, including Ayrton Senna, Lewis Hamilton, Alain Prost, Niki Lauda, Mika Hakkinen. Just some incredible memories, some incredible achievements in 37 years with McLaren. So obviously, whoever comes next in the McLaren story down the road this year or next or whenever in the future, they will be under the shadow of Ron Dennis. So definitely an end of an era, but it's obviously been a bit of an ongoing saga. He was put on quote unquote gardening leave last November. I think he was trying to broker a deal or something with some consortium of Chinese
he wanted to sell his share there, but they were like, no, we'll buy you out. We'll buy you out.
Yeah, exactly. So end of an era, but a little bit disappointing to see him kind of go out like that, considering everything that he did for the team in Formula One. But it's been a long time. It's been since 2008 since they won the last Drivers' Championship, and 1998, or is it 1997?
98
something
for the constructors.
Like that. Constructors. So, I mean, It's been almost 20 years when you think of McLaren and the success that they've had and how dominant that they've been over the years. To think that it's been 20 years since they won their last constructors title is just absolutely mind-boggling. I can't wrap my mind around it to be quite often.
They've won world championships since then.
Yeah.
2008, Lewis Hamilton was the last time. But it was like at a time where you had other teams that were competitive, either the Ferraris or others. The Renault was really competitive up until that point for Fernando Alonso, right? We'll not forget. So in the early 2000s, that's where Renault got a few of those, Ferrari got a few of those, while McLaren sometimes was contending for the Drivers' Championship. They're not necessarily able to have 2 drivers up there at a similar pace, which other teams did have, and that's why they haven't won a Constructors' Championship since 1998 with Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard. So it's been a long time for McLaren.
Absolutely. And talking about a long time, Bernie Ecclestone, who was obviously the top boss at Formula One for over 40 years, said this week that he couldn't do a better job running Formula One than Liberty Media is doing right now. So that honestly, Kevin, is a bit of a surprise considering some of the words that have come out of Bernie's mouth, especially in the aftermath of when
maybe he's not that senile after all.
Well, just the way that he was, some of the things that he was saying that Liberty was trying to erase his legacy from Formula One, and some of these very Bernie Ecclestone-like comments kind of made me think that, well, he sounds obviously a little bit bitter that he's been kicked out of Formula One, considering that they were going to keep him on for 3 years, and then, well, less than 6 months after that, he was out the door. But so to hear him say that is honestly quite surprising, and also a little bit refreshing. And it was kind of funny. The quote that I was reading was something to the effect of, well, Chase Carey took his job, and I think Bernie made the comparison, something to the effect of, well, if you bought the car, you might as well drive it. And I think that's a very fitting comment from Bernie Ecclestone, considering where he came from the streets of London as a car dealer way back in the 50s and 60s or whenever it was. Sounded like the proper thing to say, but it is kind of interesting and kind of cool to see what Liberty Media is doing. They've obviously taken the fan engagement to a different level with Twitter and all the different forms of social media. They're looking at some of the digital platforms and some of the initiatives that they're looking at to bring the fans into it, to make it more engaging, to make it more of a thing for them. And I think that is very good for the future of Formula One. Another famous Bernie Ecclestone quote that I've heard before was that he didn't really care about the younger generation and their Facebooks and all this sort of stuff. His ideal demographic was a 70-year-old guy who has a lot of money and is willing to spend it. So maybe a guy like Ron Dennis, who obviously has a lot of money. But anyways, it is good for the future of the sport when the new owners are as proactive and as forward-thinking as Liberty Media to try and engage a younger and more tech-savvy audience.
They don't have a choice as well because they have payments on debts to make on the purchase of Formula One. So,
yeah, what was it? Something 5 billion? It was a lot, yeah.
It was in the billions anyways. It wasn't like as bad of a deal like a UFC because those are similar entities that were bought and sold just the last couple of years. You don't have that often where like a league or it's a very weird occurrences where a league is actually owned by a single entity, which UFC was a majority and Formula One, right? So those are very similar sell, you could say, like very, very similar purchase. But I think Liberty Media did a great purchase, but still a hefty price tag. And well, to pay interest on that debt, you kind of have to make the most of it. And if you want to do it on a long run, you do exactly what Liberty Media is doing now. You fix immediate problems that you can't fix right now to show that you're doing something. So things that are easy as add a zip line, add a few more activities around the track, make it a little bit more fun. You can do this right now. It doesn't take a lot of things. Like, it's not that hard. And in the future, you can actually think of how to rethink or how to bring to today's world the entire packaged product of Formula One. So I do like how Chase Carey and Liberty Media are actually approaching their purchase of Formula One. You don't go guns blazing the first week and alienate the entire culture of the sport that you just bought. You go in quickly and you establish your credibility. So then when you come in with a drastic change, you have a track record already and people will trust what you say.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I like the changes that they've made to date. And honestly, I'm excited to see what they're going to do next year and the next couple of years beyond. I think that it bodes well for Formula One under the leadership of Liberty Media. So Kevin, why don't we switch gears now and get away from Formula One? We've got the Montreal E-Prix. Formula E is coming to town at the end of July. So I know that you're chomping at the bit here to start our coverage for Montreal. So let's get started.
I'm getting excited because I get to see great drivers that I saw on on TV just racing a few weeks ago at Le Mans. The Sebastian Buemi, who drives for Renault Idams, which is a Renault, basically. Same division. It's Alain Prost, the team director of that team. So there is some correlation with Formula One too. And we've seen Alain Prost actually in Baku in the paddock of Renault, and that was quite fun to see. And their relationship might be more intriguing in the future, where hybrid technology might be different in Formula One and could actually connect with the Formula E division of manufacturers. But that's like the goal down the line. That's where manufacturers are jumping in. And, well, to use the expression you just said, they're jumping at the bits to be involved in Formula E to better their electric capabilities in cars and make better electric cars. And that's like the idea and the philosophy behind that series. And that's very important for the future of humanity. If we want to be able to have children and grandchildren of our grandchildren, well, they need to have a place to live. And if we continue the way we do now, they won't. So one of the best things is to facilitate and make electric transportation attractive to the masses. And sports cars that are electric and costs that are cheap, Well, the track people. And that's when we'll truly make a dent in fossil fuels. And that's kind of a bit of a thinking of this too. They create better technology, and eventually down the road that trickles down to having more affordable electric car technology that are more performant and will be as performant, if not better, than fossil fuel cars, which then brings the appeal to motorheads, to everybody who likes big and better cars, to the electric car, and problem solves. But that's 20 years down the road. For now, this series evolved a lot over the last 3 years, Mike. It went from being basically a commissioned series where they found a motor. There was a McLaren motor, electric motor, the same one used in P1 supercars for McLaren. That motor mixed with a Spark Dallara built chassis. And you had right there the cars, and there were 44 commissioned, 4 per team, 10 teams. And that was done, right? So you had the first season. But eventually manufacturers wanted to do more, wanted to build their own drivetrain, their own engine. So the chassis is still, it's a Dallara chassis. So it's a Spark Dallara chassis. But the manufacturers now, some of them create their own engine. Some of them, the battery is the same for everyone, by the way. So that's the playing field. The level playing field is the same battery for everyone. Because that could be really like the big difference. If somebody gets like a battery that's twice performant as the other one, they can use more power twice as long, and then it wouldn't be fair. They would do twice as much lap, right? So batteries are equal for everyone. But the engine, the drivetrain, which is the main part of an electric engine, the manufacturers do so. And you have manufacturers like Andretti, which is in there, Mark, which is very impressive to me. MS Admin Andretti is the name of the team. You have Audi now as well, ABT Scheifer Audi Sport. And Formula E is right now the pinnacle of Audi Motorsport. They're not involved in anything bigger, any other bigger series. That tells you the commitment that Audi's giving on Formula E. And you have other like privateer type of team. They're not necessarily connected to a manufacturer of regular cars like Faraday Future Dragon Racing. It's Penske is involved, but it's more than just Penske. It's like the privateers a bit, if you want to compare it to Le Mans. A Venturi Formula E team as well is another private team that is not necessarily involved 100% with the manufacturer itself, but because it's equal, they still have decent performance. Next EV is a company very involved in electric components, and they are a manufacturer as well, and they're one of the 3 companies that actually are suppliers for the privateers team. So you have Renault, which Mark is one of the best, if not the best team right now. Sebastian Buemi is the leader in the Drivers' Championship. Renault is the leader in the Constructors' Championship. They have the most efficient cars with the best drivers and the most professional setup, everything surrounding the build of their car, and that's why they're good. But Next TV is very good as well. Audi is performing surprisingly with Lucas Di Grassi. So I'll give you just a few names of the drivers, not to get lost in the shuffle, and we'll talk about it as well in the next show. Lucas Di Grassi, the first ever winner of a race in Formula E, 2014 Beijing. He won the first race, and that was impressive at the time. And Lucas Di Grassi has now been driving for Audi Sport since then, and has been close on a few occasions, like in Monaco, but it wasn't lucky earlier this year. They do have a race in Monaco, and it was really, really impressive, and quite a lot of drama, like in Formula 1, Mark. But Lucas Di Grassi, one of the favorites that you'll be able to see in Montreal at the end of the month for Audi Sports, and obviously Sebastian Buemi, leader of the championship in Renault EDAMS. And if you listen to me talk about Renault in Formula 1, I'm always impressed when because Renault changes its mind often. They evolved over the years. Oh, we're going to do this. Oh, no, we're going to stop this. We're going to try to this. Oh, no, we stop. We're going to try this. They're in Formula 1 and they're committed, and it's a new adventure. But they're committed as well in Formula E. And I do feel those two efforts are going to be helpful to each other down the road to both be successful. And I do feel Renault EDAM is going to continue to be successful in Formula E and the professionalism, and it becomes like a driving school as well. Sebastian Buemi could be in Formula 1 before you know it, and he was discovered in Renault EDAMS in Formula E. So that is really getting me excited. And Mark, there's a name like Mahindra Racing. Rings a bell? Mahindra used to be a Formula 1 team. Now, their highest pinnacle racing of that pyramid of motorsport is Formula E. Jaguar, a manufacturer that creates its own drivetrain now in Formula E, the pinnacle of their racing pyramid. So a lot of manufacturers, and BMW is thinking about going in. I think it's the most up-and-coming series in the entire world right now outside Formula One.
Well, definitely. When you see some of the teams that are in it, and like you say, some of the teams that are considering going into Formula E next year and beyond, isn't Mercedes entering the series in 2018?
Yes, it is. I am 95% sure.
Yeah, so I mean, you look at that, and like you say, if Audi has committed all their racing resources to Formula E, that says something. I mean, you look at how successful that they've been at Le Mans over the last several years, that this is a very interesting and very exciting development. So,
and they stopped Le Mans to do this. They stopped Le Mans saying, look, we want to have better... Le Mans is not enough for us to develop our hybrid and electric capabilities. We want to fully commit our resources to this project. And there is other part of Audi Motorsport, of course, but this is the pinnacle of Audi Motorsport now. So that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we go from here? I guess we're going to be ramping up our coverage over the next couple of weeks, right?
Absolutely. So now I'll give it like a quick overview, like the big favorites to look at in Montreal and the team and the manufacturers. So it's not as foreign the next time I go a little deeper in giving you names like Nelson Piquet Jr., which rings a bell. He actually was an F1 driver. It's Nick Heidfeld. Throwback, back from the past. It's quite an interesting name in this series too. A lot of names that might be familiar, and a lot of up-and-comers. Some that are more interesting than not. Esteban Gutierrez, but you're not going to see him. He was only there earlier this season. He is now full-time in IndyCar, so that's something else, Mark. Esteban Gutierrez is now taking Sebastian Vettel's place in IndyCar.
Oh, yeah, of course, because unfortunately Sebastian crashed in qualifying for the Indy 500. Yes, yeah, that was quite a scary accident. So, yeah, well, Gutierrez was an interesting one. Obviously, he was driving in Formula One for Haas F1 last year, and obviously that didn't get extended. And now Kevin Magnussen is driving that car this year. So it's kind of interesting to see how Gutierrez has bounced around in, well, not even quite a year.
Yep, he had some Formula E. Now he is in IndyCar. But no, I'm really getting excited for this month, Formula E. There's New York coming before Montreal, so we'll give you a New York preview, some results of New York next week, and we'll talk about it a lot more. And as well, give you more of how it's going to happen in Montreal. The format of Formula E is very interesting, how they do practice sessions, qualifying, and races, especially with the double headers of Montreal and New York. Going to be very interesting, and we'll talk about this side of Formula E again on the next show, Mark.
Excellent. So what else do we have this week, Kevin?
On the network tomorrow, going to Stade Saputo, Montreal Impact versus DC United. For all you soccer fans, you can get a post-game show coming out tomorrow with all the post-game comments and reactions from Montreal's latest game. Hardwood Radio is back next week. We will be talking about the draft, crazy trades in the NBA this week, and that's coming out next week, as well as Soccer Today, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. All your greatest coverage for the world's game with a soccer perspective, Monday to Friday.
Excellent. Where can everybody find you on social media, please, Kevin?
At Kev Laramie, my social media, and every on-demand version of every show we do, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Very cool. And of course, you can follow this show on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Scuderia F1 Pod. We like to make it nice and easy. On behalf of myself and Kevin Laramie, thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you again this time next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.